On Friday, we learned how to factor trinomials, and we made a table, and we went straight from our table to our binomial factors, right? But thinking before that, we did some factoring with GCFs, greatest common factor, and we did factor by grouping. So today's lesson kind of blends a lot of that stuff all together. We're also factoring trinomials again today. What's a trinomial? A polynomial with what? Three terms. So knowing how many terms kind of let you know how you're going to go about factoring. Anytime we factor with a trinomial, we're going to make a table. Okay, trinomial, make a table. Have that in your brain. Okay, but first, before we factor a trinomial, we're going to look and see what the GCF is. If the GCF is 1, we'll go ahead and make our table. All right, so look at this trinomial. 6x squared plus 17x plus 5. What's the greatest common factor of all three terms? Does all of them have an x? Well, these two numbers are prime numbers, so the GCF is 1, right? Okay, so an x is not in every term. Now, this looks different from the ones we did on Friday because the leading coefficient is not a 1 anymore. There's actually a number there besides a 1. Okay, so that lets you know that, I call this factoring trinomials the long way. Okay, it's actually the only way to do it. But it's just what you have to do when you have a leading term that's not a 1. So trinomials, we're going to make a table, okay? That's how we show our work on trinomials is we make a table. You're going to multiply. Sorry, I have y'all froze. You're going to multiply to get first times last. I briefly went over that the other day, okay? 6 times 5 is what? 30. So write down 30 for your multiply number. And you're going to add to get the middle term again, which is what? 17. So just make sure your multiplied number is what you get from first term times last. Okay, first times last. All right, now these are all positives. I did that on purpose for the first example just so we get kind of the hang of things. All right, we want some numbers that will multiply to get 30 but add to get 17. So 1 and 30 ain't going to work. But I'll just list it here. 15 times 2. Does that add to get 17? Y'all agree? Okay. Now, after you do your table, we're not going straight from table to a binomial. Okay? We got to do a little bit more work today. So what we're going to do with our table is we're going to take these two numbers and we're going to change the middle number to those two numbers. So we're basically splitting the middle term. So we're going to change 17x to 15x plus 2x. Okay? So we're splitting the middle term. So you're going to copy 6x squared. And where there was a 17x, you're going to replace it with plus 15x plus 2x. So you're breaking up that middle term. And then you're copying the last term, plus 5. Okay? So all we did is we substituted. When they had 17x, we put in 15x plus 2x. So don't throw that together to make 17x. Okay? So we used our table to split the middle term. Now we have how many terms in our polynomial? 4. How do we factor with 4 terms? Factor by grouping. So we're going to finish it with grouping. So we use our table to split the middle term, and then we do factor by grouping. Okay? Which is something we've already done. So everything we're doing today is stuff we've already done. We're just putting it all in one problem. Okay? So factor by grouping, we put parentheses around the first 2 terms. Space back. And the last 2 terms. And these are all plus signs, so that's going to make it a little easier. So grouping, we do GCF. What's the greatest common factor in my first 2 terms? 3x. Y'all agree? Copy 3x. Parentheses. What times 3x is 6x squared? 2x. Plus what times 3x is 15x? 5. Close your parentheses. Put your plus sign. What's the GCF in the next term? 1. So if your GCF is 1, aren't you just going to copy the parentheses? Because if you factor out a 1, everything's staying the same, right? Now, are both of the parentheses the same? Those are our binomials. So what are they? 2x plus 5, and what's left in parentheses? 3x plus 1. So these are our factors. So yeah, it just combines what we did for factor by grouping and trinomials. Okay, we make our table to help us split the middle term. Then we'll have 4 terms, and we do grouping. That's it. There's a method to the madness. Now, y'all get excited because when I was in high school, there was no method. It was guess and check, right? You strategically guess what the binomials would be, and then you would have to FOIL it back out until you got one that worked out. And that was a pain in the tail, okay? So this method will get them right every single time. No guessing, you know you're right. It's pretty cool. Okay, number 2. Here's another one with all plus signs just to help us get rolling. We're going to start throwing negatives in a little bit. All right, it's a what kind of polynomial? Trinomial. So we're first going to look for the GCF. Is there a GCF besides 1 with those 3 terms? No, there's not. 5 goes into 10, but it don't go into 27. And they don't all have an X. So it's a trinomial, which means we have to make a table. We want to multiply to get what number? First times last will be 50. And add to get what number? 27. And I need all positives, so that's good. Y'all tell me what do you think is going to work? 25 times 2. If I add 25 plus 2, do I get 27? Yes. Okay, so since we have longer problems today, if you hit the factors that make the table work correctly on the first try, we're good to go. Okay? You don't have to put as many in your table today. That's why we practiced that last week. Okay? All right, so what do we do with that 25 and 2? Yeah, you split the middle term. So copy your 5x squared, and you take 25 and 2 and put x's with them. So plus 25x plus 2x, and then plus 10. So you keep the same first term and the same last term. You just change the middle term from your 2 terms that worked in the table and put x's with them.
First, like the D term always go first.
It don't matter.
Okay.
No, it doesn't. When there's a negative in there, I'll kind of show you how I prefer it, but that make it easier, but it don't matter mathematically. How many terms do we have across there now? 4 terms in our polynomial, so how do we factor? Grouping. All right, so I grouped them this way. What is my GCF in my first group? 5x. Now, if you swapped yours, because he was asking if we could put it in a different order. It is, but your work won't look like mine for grouping, but you'll get the same 2 binomials. Does that make sense? Okay, so my GCF in my first group is 5x. Parentheses, what multiplies times 5x to get 5x squared? Plus what times 5x is 25x? 5. Good. Plus, what's the GCF in my second group? 2. Y'all agree? Parentheses, what times 2 is 2x? Plus what times 2 is 10? 5. Do I have the same binomials in both parentheses? So parentheses, what are my 2 binomials in? Yeah, there you go. It don't matter the order. As long as you got them both, a 5x plus 2 and an x plus 5. So a little bit longer, but it's not terrible, right? Okay, I think we're going to see a negative. Yes. A negative. So y'all copy that trinomial down, please. And birds are Twitter pated out there. All right. What's the GCF here? 1. What kind of polynomial is it? So we're going to make a. Now, I keep asking you all those things because tomorrow we're going to throw every kind of factoring all at you at once. Okay? So we're going to factor all kinds of polynomials tomorrow. So we want to multiply to get what number? 12. And add to get what number? Negative 13. What kind of signs are we going to need? Both negative, because I got to multiply to be positive 12, but add to be a negative number. Y'all with me? What do y'all think is going to work? Negative 12 and negative 1? Does that add to get negative 13? Sure does. Okay, so we keep 2x squared. And what goes in the middle? Minus 12x, minus 1x, and then plus 6. Okay, so this is going to be one of the more challenging grouping problems when we have a minus in the middle, because, you know, we sometimes have trouble with those second parentheses when we have a minus in the middle. So we'll have to be careful. So we got 4 terms across, so we do grouping. What is our GCF in my first group? Just 2? 2x, good. Parentheses, what times 2x gets 2x squared? X minus what times 2x is negative 12x? Yeah, minus 6, good. Now this is a minus in the middle, so make sure you put a minus. Now what's the GCF between 1x and 6? 1. Now that's a negative 1 GCF, okay? So it was what times negative 1 equals negative 1x? A negative times what equals a negative? Positive 1x. So you can just put x. And then what times a negative 1 equals a positive 6? A negative 6. Very good. And y'all, if you get confused about the signs right there, you know this one has to match this one, right? So if your terms are looking like they're going to be the same, then you know this one has to match that one. So there's your little clue. So do we have the same thing in both? Yeah. So what are our 2 factors? Good. And 2x minus 1. And you can, if you wanted to check it without foiling it all the way out, you can do like a partial check. Foiling this is x times 2x squared. And then do the last term is negative 6 times negative 1 positive 6. Yeah. So you can do a quick check on just the first and last terms without foiling out everything. Does that make sense? All right. Another trinomial. More negatives. All right. So, what's the GCF? Yeah, those are all prime numbers and they're different. So the GCF is 1. It's trinomial, so we make a table. I want 2 numbers that multiply to get what number? And add to get what number? Negative 3. What kind of signs do we need here? Yeah, if they multiply to be negative, I need a negative times a positive, right? Oops, my thing ain't on right. But if they add to be a negative, the bigger one's negative. Y'all agree? Okay. Negative 4, positive 1. Does that add to get negative 3? Yeah. Okay. Now, here's how I do this, y'all. When I have one of each, y'all see how it's easier to do factor by grouping when you have a plus sign in the very middle? Y'all agree that it's easier to do it? Some people it don't bother, okay? But I prefer it when there's a plus sign in the very middle. I mean, I can do the negatives, but I'd rather it be a plus sign there, okay? So if that's the case, do your positive one last. Do your negative one and then your positive. So the plus sign's in the very middle. Does that make sense? So do 2x squared minus 4x plus 1x. You can just put plus x minus 2. Okay, because I mean, you can do it, but if you put the positive first and then the negative, you'd have a minus in the very middle. So when I have a choice, I like to put a plus sign in the very middle. Now, you can't do that if they're both negative, can you? No, if they're both negative, you're going to have a minus in the middle regardless. But if you have one of each, I like to arrange it so the plus sign comes last. So that way the plus sign's in the very middle. Okay? So grouping. Group the first two and the last two. What is my greatest common factor in my first group? 2x. Parentheses. What times 2x is 2x squared? Yep. X. Minus what times 2x is negative 4x? Negative 2. Plus, what's my GCF in my next group? 1. If the GCF is just 1, you copy your binomial. And do we have the same binomial in both parentheses? Yes. So what are they? And 2x plus 1. So I kind of like it when there's a negative and a positive just so I can make sure there's a plus sign in the middle. Okay. And again, we can do that little quick check. X times 2x is 2x squared. Negative 2 times 1 is negative 2. Okay. I think there's going to be a you try after this one. So if y'all need help with something, if you're not getting something, let me know. What's the GCF of this polynomial? 1. It is 1. I got 2 primes in there, so it's got to be 1, and there's no x's for everybody. All right, so what kind of polynomial is it? So we're going to make a table. So I need 2 numbers that multiply to get what number? And add to get 14. What kind of signs? And the bigger one will be a positive. Are we getting better on recognizing those signs, y'all? All right. Positive 15 and negative 1. Does that add to get me 14? Yeah. Now, how do we want to arrange it, though? Negative first, then the positive when we write our 4-term polynomial. Does that make sense? So we use those 2 numbers to split the middle term. So keep your 3x squared. And then I'm going to rearrange that so I have the minus first, then the plus. So minus 1x. Well, I don't know what that crazy minus sign looks like. Minus 1x plus 15x minus 5. And again, I don't care if you put a 1 right there without x or not. It doesn't matter. But I do have a plus sign in the very middle. And I have 4 terms now, so how do I factor with 4 terms? Factor by grouping. Group the first 2 and the last 2. Now, what's my GCF in my first group? X. I only hear one person talking to me. I need about 24 of you guys talking to me. What times x is 3x squared? 3x. Minus what times x is negative x? 1. Negative 1. Plus, what's our GCF in the next group? I'm still not hearing 24 people talking to me. What's GCF in the next group? Okay, thank you. Parentheses, what times 5 is 15x? 3x. I'm still just hearing this side, not this side. Okay, this side has to be quiet. If you're from here over, be quiet for just a second. What times 5 is 15x? Okay, there's still about 12 people over here. What times 5 is 15x? 3x. Okay. Minus, what times 5 is negative 5? What times 5 is negative 5? Yeah, negative 1. I don't think you get out and start doing cartwheels or something. All right, so do we have the same thing in both parentheses? Yes. Somebody in this side of the room tell me what my 2 binomials are. Thank you. Very good. And I'll do my little quick check. Oh, forgot my parentheses. Don't want to leave it wrong. Is 3x times x 3x squared? Is negative 1 times 5 negative 5? Yeah, yes.
I done got just, I done a good thing there before the one else.
Yeah. You still got the same thing though, didn't you? There you go. Yeah. Yeah. Just some people have trouble with those negatives in the middle on doing that second parentheses. Y'all try both of these. Let me know if you need help. Make a table and do your grouping.
If we're talking about a slope means drive, over, run. Yes? So my line is negative. It goes down from left to right. I'm no longer worried about the direction. If it goes down from left to right, my rise is 1, my run is 4. What do you think of when I say the word rise? Up. So you think of a vertical move, yes? What do you think of when I say the word run? Horizontal, side to side, yes? Okay? We've got to know the difference in slope. And some of us still don't. So that tells me we got to go back and start doing linear equations again. So your dotted line is graph. So now we're looking at the shading part. Can we use 0, 0 as a test point? Yes, we can. All right. So we've got 2 times 0 plus 8 times 0.
Let me know if you get stuck.
Well, what's 2 times 0 and 8 times 0? 0. Is 0 less than 16? Yes, it is. So we are shading where 0 is. Raise your hand if you got that good. There you go. There you go.
Oh, somebody didn't put their name on it.
Let's look at an array. What do you notice about the volume array? There's no X. There's no X. Now, if we go way back in to linear equations where we just had y equals number and no X, that is a horizontal line. Okay, you always do like that. Horizontal. What's the slope of a horizontal line? 0. So the slope is 0. Now that y value is going to be now, will this horizontal line be dotted or solid? It will be solid.
Negative.
All right, so we're gonna go to our graph.
You see up there,
The horizontal line, we've already written all that down. We're gonna go up 3. And I'm just gonna graph you point, you can graph as many as you want,
X.
okay? Maybe with a ruler, if you have a ruler, there could be any reason why you're
Just
not.
it's a minus, it's minus 0.5. Yeah, how did you see it? One size by that. One size. Yep. Yes. Yeah, it don't matter, just a negative, so it'll be negative for you, but you do need a minus right there. You get plus, because it's minus in the very beginning.
That right. But the y value is 0, yeah? Is 0 greater than or
Is that your
homework? No, it is not. So we are not
Hang on,
taking
sorry.
0, 0.
You thought you was handing me your homework, which I'm gonna do, by the way. Okay. Okay, so you got your 2 terms. What you're gonna do, try to pick is you're gonna take those 2 terms that worked, and you're going to change that middle term to 2x
We'll
plus
talk
6x,
about vertical lines
and then
in a
copy
minute.
the last
For
term.
me, the easiest
So these two
here
terms
are
from the table would actually
lines
to the
as
middle
far
term.
as the shading goes.
Does that make
Because if
sense?
I think about
And
it,
then
if
you've
I
got
have
4
my
terms, so
line,
you go
and I think about a value that's greater than this, and my line is gonna fit. Greater than is going to be above. Does that make sense? Less than would then be below. Now, I don't want you using that technique for right now. I want you to use the test point, because the test point method will never fail if you use it correctly. And that means if you plug the correct values into the correct place.
Some of us are having trouble with those two negative ones, but I expect that. Those do make it a little bit confusing, which is okay. That's why we're going to practice. All right, y'all check them with each other, talk to each other. Y'all check on something still.
Every single person. Time change a lot, full bit of time, 2 weeks more. Slope is undefined here. Now, I'm not so worried about the y-intercept because if we know it's a vertical line, we should know where to go to graph it. Does that make sense? Okay.
Okay, on number 6. So we know we're going to make tables on these. GCF is 1, trinomials, we make tables, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So on number 6, we want two numbers that multiply to get what number? 12. And add to get what number? 8. What numbers work? 6 and 2. Now, if you do yours in a different order than mine, then your work is going to look different than me, but in your grouping, but your binomial should be the same. Okay? So I'm just going to do it this way. 3x squared plus 6x. I don't know why my pen's doing this. Plus 2x plus 4. Right? If you swap the order, then your grouping is going to be a little different than mine on the screen, but I'm telling you, your binomials will be the same. Okay? So I just did it that way. Group and group. My GCF in my first group is 3x. And that leaves me with x plus 2, right? And my GCF over here is 2, and that leaves me with x plus 2. So my binomials are 3x plus 2 and x plus 2. Raise your hand if you got those two for your binomials for number 6. Any questions? Any questions about number 6? All right, number 7 was a little bit more complicated because we do the table for number 7 and we want two numbers that multiply to get what? Positive 20 and add to get what? Negative 9. So since we're multiplying to get a positive and adding to get a negative, that means we need two negatives, right? So that means when we do our grouping, we're going to have to be careful with our signs, especially on the second set of parentheses. So did y'all say -4 and -5? Okay. So I'm just going to do it in this order. If you do it a different order, just hang on. And I can redo it in the other order if y'all need me to. So 4x squared minus 4x minus 5x plus 5. Split the middle term. Now I have 4 terms. I'll draw a line there. That kind of got into my table. And I'm going to group. So my GCF in my first group then is 4x. And that leaves me with an x minus 1. Now there's a minus right there, right? The middle term is a negative, so you got to have a minus right there. GCF over there is 5, which means it changes all the signs. So I multiply times -5 to get -5x, that's a positive 1x, and multiply to get a -5 to get, multiply -5 to get a positive 5, that's going to be a -1. Negative times a negative is a positive. So I got the same in both, so I'm getting an x minus 1 and a 4x minus 5. Any questions about how I did that negative? Do I need to work it with the other order? All right, raise your hand if you got those two binomials on that one. Okay, so to me, those are just the most complicated ones when you have a minus and you have to think about the second binomial over here. Does that make sense? Okay. But if you have one of each, you can rearrange it so you have a plus sign in the middle. I do like that about them. Okay, so this only happens like a fourth of the time, which is, you're still going to have to know how to do it, but the rest of them have other ways around it. Does that make sense? Okay, so I'm going to show you guys a special scenario. In case you're wondering, I just have 2 more examples. Number 8, number 9. Yeah, there you go. But that doesn't mean this isn't important. And usually the last ones are slightly more complicated than the rest, right? Usually. Sometimes not. But these kind of are. Now, what do you know is different about number 8? Yeah, we haven't seen it yet where the leading term is a negative, have we? Okay, so the first term is a negative. First time we've seen that. Now, you really don't want to make a table and do factor by grouping, y'all, when the first term is a negative. So we're going to fix the first term being negative by first thing factoring out a -1. Zoom that in a little bit. Okay, so the way we do that is you're going to take -1 and we're going to use brackets. And the reason we're using brackets is because in a little bit I'm going to use factor by grouping. And what does grouping use? Parentheses. All right, so I want to use brackets to factor out my -1 just so it don't get overcomplicated with my 50,000 parentheses. Okay, so when I factor out a -1, I'm going to change all my signs. All right, so factoring out -1 changes your signs to 4x squared minus 12x minus 7. Okay, so yeah, again, I'm just using brackets so that I'm not using extra parentheses because it's going to get really clustered with all my parentheses and brackets. Okay, so after you have factored out a -1, then you're going to look at your polynomial in your bracket and then factor that. GCF is 1, it's a trinomial, so we make a table. So after we factor out the -1, we kind of ignore it, but we can't leave it off. So we're just going to kind of leave it hanging out there, okay? So make a table. We want 2 numbers that multiply to get what? -28. And add to get what number? -12. Watch your signs. I need a negative times a positive. Sorry, y'all, my Zoom is going nuts. A negative times a positive and what? Negative's bigger. -7, +4. Does that add to get -12? Close, but not hardly. -14, +2. Does that add to get -12? Yes. So what am I going to do with those 2 numbers? You are. So I'm going to split the middle with those 2, right? Okay, I'm going to split that -12x with those. So you got to keep your -1 outside with the brackets. If you don't keep that out there, your problem's not mathematically correct. And that's a big thing in math is you got to stay mathematically correct from step to step to step. Okay? So copy your 4x squared. And instead of -12x, we're going to put, and yeah, we're going to do the negatives and the positives. So we already have them in that order. So that's good. So -14x plus 2x minus 7, close your bracket. All right, now inside the bracket, how many terms do we have? How do we factor with 4 terms? Grouping. Group the first 2 and the last 2. Okay, so I'm going to keep my -1 in the bracket hanging out. See, this looks messy, but it's just because we got to keep that -1 out there. All right, so first group, 4x squared minus 14x. What's my GCF in those 2 terms? 2 and x. Y'all agree? 2x? Okay. Parentheses. What times 2x is 4x squared? 2x. And what times 2x is -14x? -7. So -7. All right, plus. What's my GCF in the next group? Yeah, they're both primes, and only one of them has an X, so the GCF is 1. And if the GCF is positive, trying to write a 1. Hello, where's my pen go? Are you freaking kidding me?
Is that way?
Yeah. Not cool. I know. I flipped it over. There it goes. It just needed to be flipped over. I don't know. Yeah, something like that. All right. So if your GCF is positive 1, you just copy your parentheses just like it says. And are they the same in both parentheses? Okay, so when you write your factors, just put -1 outside your two factors. And your binomials are 2x minus 7 and 2x plus 1. So you got to drag that -1 all the way to the end. Okay?
Oh, so you can take the bracket off?
Yeah, when you write your binomial factor, then you can put brackets around it, but it still just means -1 times this times this. Right? So since all of that means multiplication, you could leave it in a bracket or not. Yeah, it's just messy. It's not really complicated. It's just messy, and you just kind of know to ignore it. It's going to be there. Stick your finger over it and ignore it. Right? Okay, let's do one more.
That's series 3. So your graph should look like this. Now we haven't done any shading. Can we use 0, 0 as a test point?
Okay, so what do we do first if our leading term is a negative? Factor out a -1. Yeah. So we use a bracket. So what happens when we factor out a -1? Change all of our signs. Y'all need to make sure you're writing this. So change all my signs. Okay, y'all look. Now in my parentheses, in my bracket, do y'all see that the leading term is 1? And didn't we do leading term is 1 Friday? And on Friday, didn't we just go table answer? Right? So guess what we can do on this problem? Table answer. Okay? So after you factor out your negative, if you have a leading term of 1 here, there's nothing in front of there besides 1, then you can just go straight from table to your binomials. Okay? Nice. So let's make our table. We want two numbers that multiply to get what? -28 and add to be 3. I need a negative times a positive, and the bigger one's going to be a what? Positive. And what? -4. Does that add to get +3? Yes. So got to keep -1. And what are my two binomials? X plus 7 and x minus 4. Very good. So, yeah. So after you do your -1, if you have a leading term like we did over here that's not a 1, then you got to do table, and then you got to split the middle term and do it the long way with the grouping. If you do that and your leading term is a 1, you can go table to your binomials. Okay? All right. So any questions about anything we learned in class today? All right. That's the end of notes. Have a good day. Now, y'all listen.